It's because it's cost effective. If you fit a premium tyre with a premium retread and regroove and retread that tyre, you have the lowest cost of operation, and they know that. And believe you me, they're the experts in this industry in terms of how to get value from tyres. So that should give us all confidence and all belief that we have a product which can deliver cost savings, because the people that really understand the industry the best, the premium manufacturers, are using it. And then you've got those guys alongside them, the largest of the fleets, who've got the resources, who've got the understanding, the people inside the business that can do all the analysis necessary to figure out the total cost of ownership. And they're picking retreads. They're choosing retreads for the sustainability argument, but also because of the economics. And then you've got those medium-sized fleets where the reason why they're not today choosing to fit retreads isn't because they're ignorant, it's because they don't necessarily have the resources to understand the full TCO and don't have the resources to focus so much on sustainability and CSR. We need to help them in that. Honestly, we've got a fantastic TCO argument. The economics of retread, premium retreads, it should be uncontested. It's the cheapest way to run a fleet. And then on top of that, the cherry on the cake is the sustainability. But we've got to do a better job of explaining that to those medium-sized fleets, because there's much more of those guys than there is of the big ones. In Europe, the pyramid is very, very flat. The medium and the small is much more volume in terms of tyre usage than the really big guys. So that's the area of opportunities in the medium fleet segment and even the owner-operator segment. And to win that argument, we've got to get the economics in there.
Yeah. The
cherry on the cake will be sustainability, in my view. It's the economics that we've got to do a better job at explaining. But the fact that the manufacturers using retread should give us all hope, because those guys know the best. And they're not doing it because they like the product, they're doing it because it's the cheapest way to run those fleets. And that's still the truth today, as it was 30 years ago.
Stefan, have you got anything to...
Yeah, well, as we hardly sell tires directly to the fleets, as a material producer, we are not so much in direct contact with the fleets. Right. So we do not know all these aspects. We hear it. My feeling is at the moment that also for these medium and small-sized fleets, that they are also thinking about this argument and also thinking about TCO and sustainability. But again, as I mentioned before, when it comes to the final decision, it's still something else what they decide, and it's still not the way going with retreads. And this is something, where we still need to do work.
Sure. Okay, so the third question. Sorry, David. Yeah.
Add one thing to that. So I think, and maybe this is more of a U.S. perspective, but one of the other hurdles I think we have to get over is that many people associate environmental decisions with increased cost, right? So if you want to have solar, you have to install solar panels on your house. If you want to buy an electric vehicle, it costs more than an internal combustion vehicle. If you want to offset your carbon when you fly, you have to pay the airline extra money. So I think there's additional education we can do where the environmental benefits of retreading, it's a lower cost. So you can make an environmental decision that also benefits you from a financial standpoint as well. And I think that's the other phase of us getting over the hurdle, so people can understand that an environmental decision isn't going to cost them more money.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question relates to communication. So I'll start with you again, David, if that's okay. So how can the industry communicate the message better? Historically, the retreading industry has not been terribly good at communicating its benefits to the fleets. So what can we do better? What messages does it need to be getting across? And how can it achieve it more cost effectively?
Yeah, the challenge, again, going down, it's not about reaching those big fleets. It's those small and medium people that we need to convince, which is tough. Like, where do you find those people? So we, in the U.S., we go to trade shows that are targeted to owner-operators and smaller fleets. And we do Spot the Retreads contest, for instance, at a big trucking show in Louisville. So we have new tires and retreads side by side, and we have people see if they can determine which is which. Unsurprisingly, 80% of them cannot tell the difference between a new tire and a retread, and that allows us to have a conversation with those individual owner-operators. And I often equate it to like hand-to-hand combat. Like, if I can convince this one guy in front of me at the booth, then when he's at the coffee shop at the next truck stop, he can convince someone else. And I've seen that happen in front of me at the trade shows, where someone will start doing my job for me and saying, well, if you're not using retreads, you're making a bad choice. The other thing that we've tried to do with TRIB is to provide resources to allow people to understand the environmental benefits. So we have an environmental savings calculator on the TRIB website. So it's very simple. You put in, how many retread tires you buy, and it will spit out what sort of savings you have from oil, carbon emissions, electricity savings. And we could make it a lot more complex than that, but we wanted to keep it very simple to say, if you're retreading, these are some of the environmental benefits, and it's easy for you to see that through us.
Okay. Guy?
It's a very good question, and as we mentioned, the pyramid is very flat in Europe, and that means that there's an awful lot of medium-sized fleets, and there's even more owner-operator fleets, and it's practically impossible to physically visit those guys and girls to explain the benefits of products or services or retreads or anything else. So you have to look for opportunities where these people coalesce and gather. And the trade shows, as David said, is a fantastic opportunity because they do visit those. Truckfest we have here in Germany, which is an area where you do get a lot of owner-operators going, and we participate in that because it's the only chance we get to meet those guys and girls in any one year, because we don't have enough salespeople to visit physically those people. So we have to look at, a bit like a wall of sound, we have to look at trade shows, we have to look at journals, we have to look at press, we have to look at media. We also have to influence the governments to start to promote our industry more. We have to explain more about the overall importance of mobility generally, because honestly, if you speak to the average person in the street here in Cologne, they don't really understand the importance of mobility, let alone retreading, let alone tires, let alone haulage. That's a big challenge for the industry in general, and unless we can get people to understand the importance, then it really is low down on the pecking order in terms of the prioritization that governments have and hauliers have. So I don't think there's one golden bullet or silver bullet. We just need to keep communicating. But one thing I do think we need to do, and that is have an agreed industry set of key messages and standard communication that we want to try and pass, because we're all trying individually to do things, but if we gathered together and said, okay, these are the 4 key things we want to be talking about, and sustainability is one of them, certainly economics is definitely another one of them. The other part of it is the economics outside of the actual tire usage. It's the number of jobs. 36,000 retread jobs here in Europe, about 9,000 here in Germany, specifically doing retreading today, and if you're outside of that, probably another 3 times that volume. $2 billion business, €2 billion business. Half of that goes in salaries. These are the kind of things that we need people to understand so that they start to take the industry a little bit more seriously. So we could perhaps pick 4 or 5 key messages and then get all the stakeholders to start to communicate them consistently using a wall of sound. Then you've got a chance. But today, honestly, the way that we've been doing, we haven't succeeded, and that's why the market is going down, down, down. We're failing in that. So we need to change. We need to find a better solution because the old one isn't working.
Yep, absolutely. Stefan?
I want to add 2 aspects which I think we have to communicate. One aspect is the retreaded tire is safe. I think there are still a lot of obstacles regarding the quality of the product. And the other point is it's high performing. A retreaded tire is performing on the same level as a premium new tire, if you want to have it in that way. Of course, you need a premium casing to get a premium retreaded tire. And this, I think, are 2 additional aspects which we have to communicate. All the rest, I fully agree. What I think is also very important, and here I speak mainly for the independent retreading industry, I think we need to join forces. It will not be possible for each single player on the market to be successful. We need to join forces in associations, in networks, and to try to even go to each single fleet, small fleet if possible, and to reach everyone if possible.
Okay, so several years ago when I was the director of a trade association in the UK, 2 of the most important jobs I had was the communication. That was the one. The other was trying to liaise with government to try and get them to understand and support retreading. That I found tremendously difficult. We're talking about 15 years ago now, and trying to speak to somebody and getting them to listen was like getting blood out of a stone, to be honest, half the time. So these days we've seen, the Italians be reasonably successful at talking to government. I think the French also, to a degree. I mean, well, what can the industry do to get its message across better to government and get them to support the sustainability credentials of the industry better than they are at the moment?
I'll make a start.
Yeah.
There was a really good document that was produced in 2016 by Ernst & Young, called the socio-economic impact of the retread industry on Europe. For me, that was a game changer in terms of educating all of the key stakeholders about the importance of the industry, the threats to the industry, and what needed to be done to try to support the jobs and the arguments of sustainability and economics. I think that indirectly led to tyre labelling and also some of the anti-dumping taxes that came on single-use tyres coming into Europe, particularly TBR tyres. And that has stabilised the retread market. It hasn't stopped the erosion, it hasn't made it grow, it's stabilised it. But it's an old report now, it's from 2016. For me, that's something that I would advocate we should do again, an update, so that we can again get an updated version of the Ernst & Young report showing the full socio-economic impacts of the retreads from a sustainability aspect, from an economics, from a performance aspect, as Stefan said, but also the actual economics of the industry itself in the European marketplace. And that might be enough for us to get a better voice in the various stakeholders and governments that we need to influence around Europe. So I would recommend that we do an update of the Ernst & Young report.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, as you said, David, it's difficult, it's challenging, and I think one of the unique aspects about the U.S. market is that you often have to deal with individual states. So, you're dealing with 50 different state regulations of how you manage end-of-life tires or retreading or potentially providing incentives. A couple of years ago, we worked with the state of California, and we had a $250,000 program with them to help promote retreading in the state. And the whole impetus behind that was a group that they have within California called Cal Recycle. And they had historically been focused on recycling tires. So for me, there has always been this gap, and there remains this gap between new tires and recycling. There's all sorts of grants and funds that go to helping end-of-life tires when the single greatest form of recycling is retreading. And so we have tried to focus on how can we work with state and local governments to try and increase the rates of, education, which ultimately leads to increased adoption of retreading. Just last week, two representatives in the U.S. Congress have introduced retread tax legislation in the U.S. to provide favorable tax incentives for the purchase of retreaded tires. I personally think it will be very challenging for that to pass, especially in an election year in the U.S., but it's a first step forward on a national basis for us to have some sort of focus for incentives to promote retreading at a federal level as opposed to just a state level. So I go back to that hand-to-hand combat. We have to get into states and try and promote it with them, and then hopefully have an umbrella approach as well at the federal level. But it is challenging, and especially in the current political environment in the U.S. Getting anything done and anything passed is a Herculean task.
Stefan?
I think the political situation in Europe is also not much better than in the US, but I think that the challenges are pretty the same. We still have the situation that we have a European Union on the one hand, but we still have each state for itself making decisions. I think we also have to do this the same way. We have to try to be active on each level. That means on the European Union level, we have to be active on the national level, and we also have to be active in certain regions or in each regions where we still have activities and retreaders. And I think this is also one important thing, especially for the independent retreading industry. We have to understand and we have to accept that it's not only producing retreaded tires, but we have also to accept that it is our task to talk to politics and to politicians. And this is, I think, still something where we can improve and where we still have possibilities, especially on the regional level. Everything on European level and on national level has to be done by associations, which are also just a representation of each single player.
I'll just add one very quick point. I think it's fair to say we're pushing at a more open door today when we're talking about sustainability than we ever were before in Europe. if you speak to all of the governments, all of the associations, they're all pushing for decarbonisation of the mobility, EUDR regulations, lots more regulation pushing us in the direction of trying to find ways to decarbonise. Unfortunately, I think today we've got too much of the industry focusing on what might be the erotic solution or the exciting solution of hydrogen vehicles, electric vehicles, very exciting, high-tech. But the reality is you can decarbonise mobility, especially ICE vehicles, by doing a better job at managing tyres, and retreading and regrooving are part of that story. So we should be able to capture that, explain that, and put that as part of the solution, because we're not going to decarbonise mobility with electric vehicles anytime soon. We've got a whole lot of diesels out there that we need to try and figure out ways to reduce the carbon footprint of them. And just by retreading alone, we know some of the economic benefits, 29% less land use. So EUDR is all about deforestation. You have to deforest anything if you're retreading. So this is a link into EUDR. EUDR is a huge topic. Yeah. Why isn't retread part of that story? It isn't today, it should be. So this is an example about how we could use some of the existing initiatives and make sure they understand that retreading is part of the story, not only hydrogen, not only electric vehicles.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to another topic. Next question I have is relates to independent retreaders and their place in the market. So how can the independent retreading industry work better with the new tyre manufacturers to promote retreading as a sustainable solution? I'm coming to you, Guy, for that one first. I think you're the man to answer.
Well, I'm in a very unique situation. I'm probably unique in this building that we're investing in retreads currently in Hankook. Our target is to double or triple our volumes of retreads in the next 2 or 3 years. We've got 5 plants producing our product. We're investing in new factories, new facilities, new capacity virtually every day. So when we say that we see a future in retreads, we genuinely do see a future in retreads, and we're working with independent manufacturers. 4 of those factories are not Hankook owned, they're independents that are producing our products on our behalf. If we genuinely want to offer to our fleet partners the best possible cost of operation, I have to find a solution for retreading and regrooving and alignment and pressure checking. So I need to align myself with very, very professional and capable independents, because I don't have the luxury of retread factories all over Europe or service providers all over Europe. So we are purposely partnering with those companies. So we have 5 today that we're operating with, 4 of which are independents, and in the future we'll have more, I'm sure. Yeah. So I genuinely do see a future for the very good quality independent retreaders that, as Stefan said, can produce a product that's as good or even better than the alternative new products that are in the marketplace, because that's part of the story also. So if we got independents out there that can do that, we're partnering with them to produce our own retreads so that we can reduce the total cost of operation for our fleet partners, which is one of the key objectives for Hankook.
Okay, Stefan, you go next.
Well, my feeling is the independent industry is very open to talk to the new tire industry. But my feeling is as well that there is more reservation and retention from the new tire industry to talk to the independent retreading industry. Fortunately, there are exceptions, but I would appreciate if there would be more new tire producers talking with us, and more regularly. This would be very helpful, and I think joining forces would be beneficial for all of us.
Absolutely. David?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is a very challenging market because about 96% of the truck and bus retread market is concentrated in the hands of 5 players. So there is a consistent group of independent retreaders that provide a quality product, and they have great relationships with their customers, and they continue to deliver for those customers, and they continue to grow. But it is challenging market for independent retreading in the U.S., just given that sort of almost a stranglehold with some of those big major players. There are obviously, really successful niches geographically and also with particular applications that they can continue to exploit and grow. And I think relationships are so important in the tire business and the retreading business. And those independent retreaders have done a great job of cultivating those individual relationships so that they can be successful. But the harsh reality is it's a challenging market for them.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I'm going to start with Stefan for the next question because it relates to the retreading material suppliers. technological developments are retread material suppliers making at the moment to make retreading more sustainable, would you say?
Well, on the one hand, a retreaded tire per se is more sustainable than a retreaded tire, but I have to admit that this is not enough. So we at the end we have to do the same job more or less as the new tire industry. We have to improve the quality of the materials. We have to produce materials with a lower rolling resistance. As rolling resistance has several impacts, but the compound is one aspect. We have to produce materials with higher mileage. We have to use greener or bio-based raw materials. So here we have more or less the same challenges as the new tire industry. From a technological point of view, it's no problem for us to produce it. We have the same technology in our factories. So here there's no problem to do it. It's more a question whether the market is demanding for these kind of products. At some point, this especially raw materials are sometimes more expensive, and my feeling is the markets, fleets, customers are not prepared to really pay for these sustainable advantages.
Okay.
I think Stefan's right. The retread materials development, product development for the independents has to mirror what you're seeing in the new product premium manufacturers. And it's for that point that we've started with, which is the core of the success of the industry has to be the economics. You have to be able to prove that the performance of a retread is as good or better than many of the lower cost or equal cost alternatives. That's the core of the industry, has to do that. The good news today is just the truth. A premium quality retread will outperform a lot of the single life products in the marketplace. Premium quality retreads are getting better every day because the material manufacturers are investing in more elaborate, more sophisticated materials, as the new manufacturers are also. We all have to go for 100% sustainability of materials, which means we're replacing at least 60% of the existing materials in tyres in the next 10 or 15 years. And they're going to be new exotic materials that will deliver better performance, probably at a higher cost, but overall it'll be better performance. And that has to be mirrored in retreads. If retreads don't keep pace with that, there is no future, because they cannot win purely on sustainability. So that's the point. You need to invest in retreads, not only in materials but also in processing. 3D printing is coming for tread patterns. Hankook, all of our latest generation truck products are 3D printed now. You're going to need 3D printed retreads in the next year and a half, 2 years. That's a big investment. So this is just one of the pieces of the investment. Is materials. You have 3D printing, and following on from that, you have technologies like RFID and in tire sensors that are coming also. So I see a need for significant investment in retreads alongside the new products, which is another reason why Stefan's right. We need better collaboration between premium manufacturers and independent retreaders, because they can't do it alone.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll go on to the next question then. Life cycle analyses. These are a really useful tool to help promote the sustainable credentials in the industry. How can the industry combine to produce more of these life cycle analyses and make them more widely available and better known? Anyone would like to make a comment?
I'll give it a go. I have never seen a really convincing life cycle analysis yet of the retread industry, unfortunately. I've seen quite a few in the new tyre industry. Most of the focus today when we're talking about sustainability and decarbonisation in my industry is focused on the plants. And we're talking about zero carbon, zero emissions by 2050 in our factories, which is needed. We're talking about logistics of tyres, movement, going to sea, going to rail freight, and also trying to do local production to reduce the carbon of that from that area of the life cycle. But the reality is, and maybe people in the room here know that already, that most of the carbon that's produced in tyres is coming in the usage phase. When the tyres are actually on the vehicle, it's nearly 90% of the carbon emissions come at that stage. So as an industry, and certainly what we're doing inside of Hankook, is looking much more at how our tyres can be better on the vehicle in terms of the usage phase. And there is no better example of how you can decarbonise and also optimise costs than using regrooving and retreading. I've been talking about it all my career. Manufacturers are using those products not because they're sexy, because they genuinely do save an awful lot of money and also save an awful lot of emissions. So for me, when we talk about life cycle analysis, we should do it, but we should really focus on the usage phase, which is where the retreads come in. The industry today is focusing too much on the production, the logistics, and the after-use phase, not focusing on the usage phase. And that for me is a big mistake. So that's one of the reasons why I think retreads needs to be focusing and communicating much more about that usage impact.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think one of the other challenges is that, and I think Guy mentioned this earlier as well, is that you have everybody, individual companies doing their own things. And so I think that the challenge is how can we elevate that so that we have an industry-wide or a country-wide look at sustainability and full life cycle analysis. And one of the great things about the tire industry, having worked in a number of different industries, even though we're all fierce competitors, there is also some fierce collaboration that happens for the betterment of the tire industry. And I think a life cycle analysis or an environmental and sustainability metrics that goes across all of those various tire manufacturers is an area of opportunity where we could do that. And I think we should be doing that. And it's one of the things that we're trying to do as an organization as well. And I'm hopeful we can make something like that happen.
Well, there is one life cycle analysis available some 2 years ago from Azure. But I agree. Yeah, it was the idea to make a starting point, yeah, and to have a first approach to do such a life cycle analysis where we try to compare new tires with retreaded tires, which is not that easy to really get comparable products. I also agree that the usage phase is very important. As companies, we always talk about our own production, yeah, but not too much about the usage phase. We also try to include this usage phase in this life cycle analysis as well. But yeah, this was one first approach, yeah, and I would really appreciate if to continue this kind of analysis also together, as mentioned before, to join forces. And to really create an additional argument to politics, to fleets, why to use a retreaded tire.
And I don't remember if I'm jumping ahead, but one wrinkle that we're seeing in the U.S., which may be coming or is already coming, is the effect of tire wear particles in streams. So in a couple of western states in the U.S., the presence of 6 ppd quinone is killing off coho salmon. And California has designated 6 ppd quinone as what they call a product of concern, which means that the tire manufacturers have to determine alternatives to using 6 ppd in tires, which has been used since the inception of the tire industry. And so it's not only, this sort of goes outside of life cycle analysis, but it's an impact to the industry in terms of thinking about compounds and how we manufacture tires and how we use retreads in that use phase and the potential environmental impact it has on those states that are willing to make some changes to the tire industry to protect the environment. And it's a real challenge right now in the U.S.
Okay, so let's move on to another question. This one's an interesting one. What developments are being made in factory management to make the industry more sustainable? Who wants to take that?
I can speak with some authority about new factories, but also a little bit about retreading. As I mentioned, the production phase of the total life cycle in terms of carbon emissions is about 8% of the total. So it is significant, but it's not the most significant. The most significant is the usage phase, but we can't ignore it. So in Hankook, we're looking to try to decarbonize all of our factories. So we're looking at combined heat and power, we're looking at solar, we're looking at wind, like all the other manufacturers. And it'll happen by 2050, we'll be fully decarbonized. Same story in the retread businesses. We have to be in parallel with what's happening in the new manufacturing. It's interesting to listen to the panel's discussion. I see huge parallels between the challenges we have in the retread industry and the challenges we have in the new tire industry also. We have to explain to the marketplace the total life cycle analysis of a new tire and why it's worthwhile investing in a premium product rather than a single-use product. Why that can give you economic benefits and sustainability benefits. The same argument you have for retreads. So when we talk about collaborating and combining our communication resources to get those messages out there, there's a real symbiosis between those two industries. So we have to work on that. And same with the factories. If we're going to decarbonise the new factories, we have to decarbonise the retread factories. And decarbonisation isn't only about the energy source, it's about the materials that are inside, it's about getting sustainability materials. All the points that David made, the 6D PDD or DPP, sorry, and TRWP and all of this stuff. We've got a tsunami of legislation coming. And that tsunami of legislation isn't only hitting the new manufacturers, it's hitting the retread guys, the material production guys. And I don't think we can survive that tsunami fighting alone. We need to group together. And that's all of the manufacturers, but also the new and the retread guys grouping together. So I think we need to start collaborating a lot more.
Stefan?
Well, I think it was the job of the factories over years already to improve energy waste and so on. But mainly because of economic reasons. So this was done for years. Meanwhile, nowadays there are some additional aspects, CO2 footprint, this is our daily business. And I'm very convinced that this is not the big challenge that we face. I think here we have technologies. We need to do investments, of course, to improve. But this is not the most difficult way for us. And there are other aspects of the business which are much more challenging for us.
David?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would have to add is that, if you look at the individual retread plants, so when I go in and visit retread plants today, most of the time they are excited to show me their improvements that are directly related to environmental benefits. So yes, all of the compound processing and the production that goes into the tread itself, but in the individual retread plants, every little change that they're making, so, energy efficient and motion sensitive LED lighting, painting the floors and ceilings to reduce AC or heating, depending on where they're based, collection of every single piece of material in the plant and making sure it gets recycled. Little things like not using plastic forks in the break room. So it's like, reusing their materials. So the individual retreaders know that they have the big things to do from a compounding and a processing standpoint, but also the individual little changes that they can make within their employees' behavior and the individual plants also can have a big impact as well.
Okay. So, second last question. Sustainability is really a wide-ranging topic. So sustainability is not just about being green, it's about building a sustainable society. So what can the retreading industry do to improve this situation in this regard?
Well, I think we have limited ourselves with our focus on sustainability in its current form. So we need to broaden, and I think Guy touched on this a little bit, is that sustainability is about security, jobs, protecting manufacturing in whatever area that you operate in. And I think that we need to do a better job, and we're trying this in the U.S., to say that having a strong retreading industry in the U.S. is quite frankly, a national security concern. Because if we have another issue like COVID and there is not a retreading industry in the U.S., then trucking stops. There's just not enough capacity as it exists today or it exists in the future. And so sustainability for me is a broader issue of protecting 270,000 U.S. jobs that are spread throughout the U.S. geographically. And yes, we need to do more to communicate the environmental benefits and the aspects of it, but we need to expand sustainability and talk about its requirements to protect an industry and protect people and protect the environment as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think, I come from Little Austria, so I think sustainability and also these aspects that you mentioned, I think we have a very high standard, and I would say we have this high standard in most parts of Europe. Yeah? I think if we talk about sustainability, we also need to think about other parts of the world, and we need to be aware that our activities here in Europe have effects on other parts of the world. And I think this is the main idea of main part of the idea of the Green Deal in Europe. and there are a lot of directives, regulations coming, focusing on this aspect of this approach. And there is the EUDR, deforestation regulation. There is the, for non-native, not easy to spell, the supply chain act, which is coming. There's the corporate sustainability reporting directive coming. So there are a lot of aspects coming from regulations, which we have to fulfill. And these are always focusing on these aspects which you mentioned before, and not only on Europe, but on the whole supply chain, coming from the raw material, and for each single player in the chain. The problem that I see at the moment is I fully support this approach, but I fear that with all these regulations, we create a lot of bureaucracy within the companies. We create a lot of costs, and we lose competitiveness. Inside Europe, it might be not a big problem, as we have all the same regulations to fulfill. Also, imported products have to fulfill these regulations. But the difficulty that I see is that it's nearly impossible to really control all these aspects of the business, especially for imported products. And this is a threat that we have, and this is the part of these regulations where I'm not so happy. The idea behind, I think, is very good. How we try to realize it, I think there is room to improve.
Okay, I think nearly everything's been said, so I'll focus on a new area, and that is that the economics of sustainability need to be part of the story. We're not going to get to a situation where we're going to be able to convince people purely on sustainability arguments to pay more for the product. We're failing in that today in vehicles, in tires. And the reality is, if you really do want 100% sustainable products, whether they're tires or vehicles, they're going to be more expensive. Especially in tires, the materials that need to be put into the tire are significantly more expensive than the current materials we're using. And today, the marketplace is not prepared to pay that extra cost. So I think the solution is going to have to be, if we are going to get to full sustainability, that we need to overcome that economic aspect. And it's going to have to come from some kind of support or legislation from the government to make it easier or make it more difficult for people to avoid using sustainable products, because there will always be a cheaper, lower cost alternative that probably is a compromise in terms of sustainability, probably is a compromise in terms of performance, but quite a big chunk of the marketplace in Europe don't look at those two factors, they just look at price. So unless we can find a way to force those consumers to actually take seriously sustainability and be prepared to pay more for it, whether it's an EV vehicle or whether it's a sustainable tire, then it's going to be very, very difficult. So that economic aspect is the key point that we need to figure out a solution to.
Sure. Okay, well, we're quickly running out of time here, but I would like to ask the last question, if I may, to wrap it up, which is, where do you expect the industry to be in 5 to 10 years' time with regards to establishing retreading as an undisputed sustainable choice within the life cycle of the tyre?
Okay, I'll try and make a start. Well, I'm betting at the moment on the fact that the retread industry has a good future. When I say I'm betting, Hankook are betting, we're investing in retreading, we're trying to grow the business. And the reason for that is, as a premium manufacturer, we're working with fleet partners, and we know the cheapest way to be competitive in that environment and beat our premium competitors is have part of our solution being retreads. It's simple maths. If you have a 4x2 tractor unit with a triaxle trailer in Europe, it's going to have 12 tyres. If they're all new tyres, let's make it simple, they're €100 each, it's €1,200. That's not a good way to run that fleet. The most optimum way to run the fleet is to have 4 new tyres maximum. There'll be 6 retreads and 2 regrooves, potentially, on those axles. The tractor unit will have all retreads on the drive, it'll have new tyres on the steer, the trailer will have new tyres on the last axle, the middle will be regrooves, and the first axle will be retreads. That's 30 to 35% cheaper to run the vehicle that way, as long as the retreads perform at a similar level of performance to the new tyre, which is the point that Stefan made. They need to be premium performance. That's simple maths. That's why we use retreads. It's 30 to 40% cheaper than using new products. It makes me more competitive. I can win business from my competitor premium manufacturers. So I'm betting on us winning fleets and needing those retreads. The top part of the pyramid that David mentioned at the very start of this discussion, the guys and girls that use CPK today, understand, have people that are monitoring performance, they're going to continue to fit retreads because they know it's economically sensible. We're going to see a filter down of that mentality into some of the medium fleets as they become more mature and we do better at communicating. The key part is the smaller mediums and the smaller fleets. If we can convince those guys of the merits of retreading and regrooving and tyre management, they would be stupid not to use retreads, and there's a huge future for retreads. If we fail in that, then retreads will continue where it's going, which is a gradual decline and a crystallization around premium retreads driven by large fleets and manufacturers. So that's the truth of the matter is, but I'm betting that I'm going to need a lot more retreads in 5 years' time because I'm going to have a lot more fleets fitting Hankook and they need retreads. So I'm certainly betting on this business having a future.
Cool. Okay. Next.
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation in the U.S. I mean, I'm incredibly, in the face of declining numbers in other parts of the world and challenges within the U.S., I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of retreading, and a lot of that has to do with like companies like Hankook that are investing both on the new tire side and the retread side, and so many of their targets, you know, every single one of the tire manufacturers is talking about sustainability and how they meet their own internal targets. And how do you do that without having retreading as a part of that circle? And then my belief that we will continue to convince those smaller to medium fleets about the benefits of it. It's a slog and it's hard work and it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of coverage, but I do believe that we can do that. And I'm always think about this one interaction I had at a trade show, and there were two owner-operators standing in front of me, and one of them said, I would never use, and this is the myth of retreads, right? That, they fall apart, that's what you see on the side of the road. And this individual owner-operator said, I would never use retreads, I only buy new tires. And the guy standing next to him turned and looked at him, and he's like, you're a fucking idiot. and I thought, like, okay, right in front of me at this trade show that there were going to be fisticuffs happening, and the guy he talked to him and he said, look, you're one truck, I'm one truck, and I can't do tire testing, I can't do tire management, but whatever UPS does, that's what I do. Because I know that they do the testing, they know that it's the lowest total cost of ownership, and so I think as those smaller and medium fleets continue to look at what the bigger guys are doing and we help them understand what the bigger guys are doing, then they can make those decisions for themselves. So it's not easy, but it's definitely something worth pursuing, and it gives me some hope for the retread industry globally and also in the U.S. specifically.
Excellent. Stefan?
Well, the risk for us as Kraiburg is even bigger than for Hankook, as we are fully dependent on retreading business. So yes, I am also optimistic. And there is one reason which I mentioned before. I think all these regulations which are coming will create problems for us in the implementation phases. But afterwards, they will support us in doing our business. And so I'm also convinced that retreading has a much stronger market position than we have at the moment, at least on the level which we had before, and maybe even better. But we need some tailwind. Yeah, this can come from regulations. This can from joining forces overall, players on the market to bring our arguments to the fleets and to the customers.